Beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. The Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light."
First day he created light in the dark. Second day he created heaven and the water. Third day he created earth and the seas. He created fruit and the plants you don't see. Yeah, fourth day's when he did the moon and the sun. Fifth day fish and the birds, we ain't done. Yeah, sixth day he created animals to man. Seventh day he rested. Hey, first day he created light in the dark. Second day he created heaven and the waters. Third day he created earth and the seas. He created fruit and the plants you didn't see. Yeah, fourth day he created moon and the sun. Fifth day fish and the birds, we ain't done. Yeah, sixth day he created animals to man. On the seventh day rested. Yeah, on the seventh day rested. Yeah, and he hallowed it and blessed it. Yeah. And I hope you get the message, because if not, then what you left with, you guessed it. With these churches preaching lies, it's a gimmick. They try to flip the script and make God in the image. It's the other way around, but somehow they always missing. And then you get hated if you stand up and go against it. But I'm with it, you know it's not about the fame, because if it was, why would I lose fans for his name? How is it a narrow path, but most of y'all say the same? I guess I'm crazy for not being in the crowded lane. Okay. Nowadays, right is wrong and wrong is right. But I remember God said, let there be light. First day, he created light in the dark. Second day, he created heaven and the waters. Third day, he created earth and the seas. He created fruit and the plants you didn't see. Yeah, fourth day, he created moon and the sun. Fifth day, fish and the birds, we ain't done. Yeah, sixth day, he created animals to man. On the seventh day, rested. Yeah, first day, he created light in the dark. Second day, he created heaven and the waters. Third day, he created earth and the seas. He created fruit and the plants you didn't see. Yeah, fourth day, he created moon and the sun. Fifth day, fish and the birds, we ain't done. Yeah, sixth day, he created animals to man. On the seventh day, rested. Yeah.
Then God said, "Let there be light."
Hello and welcome to Kingdom in Context. I'm Sean. I'm joined by my lovely wife, Lindsay, and our unborn baby, Levi. I want to thank you for joining us here for our Sabbath Fellowship. And just as always, moderators, thank you for being here and keeping the live chat civil, loving, and we strive not to ban permanently, but we are not afraid to put people in timeout until the end of the show if they can't control themselves. So thank you, moderators, for being here and following that example. As well as everyone else, thank you so much for being here as well. We always answer questions with our Sabbath Fellowship, but we do it at the end of the broadcast, right? So like the last 30 minutes. But we just wanted to give a big shout out to everyone that supports us in all the ways possible. Patreon, mail. We've had some incredible letters come in recently with some support, just saying how we've made an impact on people, and that touches our heart. We really appreciate your letters, guys. And I'm sorry if we are not able to physically respond to every single letter, but we just want you to know that if you're listening, your letter was not overlooked. It was read, and it means a lot to us. It's really encouraging.
Yeah, we actually keep all of them in a drawer. Like we've got a huge, it's not a junk drawer, but a drawer that would typically in our house be used as a junk drawer. Like it's all the letters and cards and everything. Yeah. Speaking of cards, last week I sent out a huge stack of thank you cards. It was like my second go around. And I covered, as far as I know, I covered everyone else who's sent us a gift through the registry. So again, if you send us a gift and you don't get a card, it's most likely because the address that I had for you through Amazon wasn't correct, or maybe you just had your first name on there and no last name. I had a few cards come back from my last time shipping a whole bunch out. So I'm sure we'll get a few back this time. Just know if you send us a gift, I sent you a thank you card back. It just all depends on if you put the right address into the registry information. So we just really appreciate everyone who's asked us for the registry to begin with, and everyone who's been sending gifts through it. So thank you guys so much. Levi's going to have everything he needs to get started. It's going to be great.
Yeah, we are super grateful for all the registry gifts.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Today, I think we wanted to talk about the creation. In case you couldn't tell from the intro song, that was Bryson Gray.
Yes.
What was it called? 7 Days? Was that the name
Yeah,
of the
I think
song?
so.
7 Days. So yeah, it's a fun song, and we wanted to talk about. We're going to actually read about the creation weight from both Genesis, Jubilees, and Second Esdras, and compare them and talk about them. And I think it's fascinating. I'm going to start with Genesis and then compare it with Jubilees and then Second Esdras. And hopefully this will be a great something to consider. You might want to share with friends and family who are unaware of this topic. A lot of churches don't really teach on this topic, and they definitely don't be teaching from the two supporting books that we'll be using that are used from other Christian canons around the world. But we use them. We talk about them. What's up?
While you pull that up and read that, I'm going to run and grab one of our fans because I didn't realize we didn't have a fan in here, and I'm hot already.
Okay.
So I'll be right back while you read.
All right.
Look up, please.
Well, I'll just wait for a minute, baby. We'll just entertain the audience until you get back. That's fine. So anyway, guys, we're excited. We're actually be doing construction in our house soon and adding an actual office and studio to the garage. So hopefully I won't be behind this green screen for much longer, but I'll be able to have a more spacious area that will hopefully have some sort of seating arrangement, maybe even a table that we'll be able to sit at and do these Sabbath fellowships and kind of have a little more better lighting, better whole controlled environment. So we're going to get this fan set up. We'll be right back. And we're back.
Sorry about that, guys.
All right.
I'm out of breath from doing that.
Yeah, it's funny because I've got a long sleeve on because it's chill outside today, and she's got the fan on. So
I must be in my third trimester.
I think you are, sweetie.
Okay.
Okay. So let's check out Genesis real quick. I wonder if this will. I don't think this will work. No, that won't work. Let's just do this. Okay. Get this set up. All right. So we'll just read a little bit from Genesis 1. It's weird that it's not filling the whole screen. Huh. Okay, whatever. So in Genesis 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And this is a plural word, the heavens. Right. The shumaim in the Hebrew is a plural word as well. Can be used for singular, but it oftentimes is used for plural. And we'll show you why we would suggest it's correct to use it as a plural in this particular passage in Genesis. Now, I just want to say Genesis is actually very much a shortened summary of this whole account. Hopefully, you guys would understand that. There's obviously, entire books could probably be written about the actual creative process as far as everything being created that we see and exist within, especially the stuff that we don't see, which is in the heavens above.
Right.
And that's what we're getting a glimpse of here in Genesis 1:1, which basically says the heavens and the earth were made. Now we're going to find out as we keep reading, the earth is not formed. So when you read this word, the earth in Genesis 1:1, don't think about what you see today with fully developed trees and grass and mountains and seas and all that kind of stuff. It was not yet formed. We're going to see that actually none of it was actually, no trees were sprouted. Nothing was formed yet. It was just a dirt basically in water. I always try to lovingly refer to it as, think of it like a fish tank, right? There's just that dirt at the bottom of the fish tank, right? But then the Father is going to get some of that water out of the way here in the next few verses and start forming the earth. But what I mean about things that it's a summary is because it tells us that the heavens were made. Well, we're going to get another heaven introduced in Genesis on day 2, Genesis 1:6-8.
Right. So
what are these other heavens that are being made in Genesis 1:1? It's very interesting. So we'll finish reading a little bit from Genesis 1:1. We'll jump to Jubilees 2 and 2 Esdras 6 and take a deeper look here. Now, verse 2 says, the earth was formless and void, and the darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. And God said, let there be light. There was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. He called the light day, and he called the darkness, he called night. And there was evening and there was morning, the first day. So a lot of people always ask, what's the light? I've tried to share my understanding of the light is it's the light of immortality. So there's a I don't like using this word because it's so abused, but there's two applications here. There's a spiritual and then there's a literal and physical, right? So there's a literal physical application separating the light of heaven from the darkness of the unformed earth with the firmaments. This is why he's going to go in later and add an additional seventh and final firmament and then actually put lights to shine down in that darkened area that he formed of the earth. So there's a physical, literal application of the separation of light and dark, but there's also a spiritual application because the heavens above are filled with the light of God, and they're also filled with the truth of his commandments, of his ways, which are the light of his Torah. And this is the light of heaven that we refer to, the Father of heavenly lights. So he's literally, this is why the Torah is called a light in Proverbs 6. I think it's Proverbs 6:24. The commandments are called lights. And so this is the idea that there's two wonderful applications to this concept of let there be lights. So he has this light existing in heaven. Everything in heaven abides. They don't have the sun and moon, but they do have the light of glory, the light of illumination of God's power and presence. And this is what we receive at the resurrection. And as explained in Revelation 22, 3-5. It's also explained in other passages in Baruch, but we're not going to go into those today. And this is the idea that why we're called children of the lights, like in 2 Thessalonians 5 and other places that we're referred to as children of the lights. This is why Yeshua in John chapter 1 is called the true light that came down from heaven. He's walking in the Father's ways. He comes down from heavenly lights of heaven. They're not lit up by the sun and moon in this part of the creation. Okay? So this is why the earth is still in darkness, unformed, sitting in a bunch of water. We're going to get to day 2 where we start to give space for the earth to be formed. But before we do that, let's go over to Jubilees chapter 2 and read the same account of day 1.
So it seems that word earth can also have two applications where earth can mean the whole of creation or it can mean just the land part of creation, right?
From my understanding, the Haaretz that's mentioned in Genesis 1:1 is speaking about the unformed land that's covered in water still.
Yeah.
Because we're going to talk about, it's going to separate the ideas of the waters later in Genesis, and also what we're about to read in Jubilees is going to separate the difference between waters and the unformed earth.
So
it's not talking about the whole of creation because it's in talking about the heavens and the earth. So the earth is a part of the things that are being mentioned.
So really the word for the whole area that we live in would just be the creation. We wouldn't just call it earth like when we were globe believers, we just called it the earth, and that's the whole thing. That's all the waters. People who are globies would think that includes heaven within that definition.
Right. So in a biblical cosmology, anything above the mountains that goes into what's called the open firmaments and further up is considered the heavens.
Okay. So when it says that the meek inherit the earth, that means the lower part, but we'll be able to travel up through.
The land that we live on now is the earth. The Haaretz, the land.
But we'll be free to travel up through the firmaments post-resurrection.
To my understanding, if you have a glorified body, yes, you can.
But we don't inherit land up there. We inherit land in the New Jerusalem down here.
An inheritance is where you live.
Okay.
And so this is where we inherit the New Jerusalem that comes down and sits on the earth, even though it's connected to the heaven above.
Okay.
We'll get into that in day 3. So let's we'll just jump up to Jubilees real quick. Jubilees chapter 2, also talking about day 1 of creation. And it says, the angels of the presence spoke to Moses according to the word of the Lord, saying, write the complete history of the creation, how in 6 days the Lord God finished all his works and all that he created. And he kept Sabbath on the 7th day and hallowed it for all ages and appointed it as a sign for all his works. So it's pretty interesting because this is also connecting the Sabbath as a sign for the creation itself.
Right.
So we know Exodus 30:31 talks about the Sabbath being a sign for his commandments. We see in Genesis 1:14 that the Sabbaths, the appointed times of the Lord, are connected to the luminaries.
Right.
So it's very fitting that Jubilees would say the Sabbath itself is a sign of the creation itself. Did you guys realize that? So when you're observing Sabbath, it's actually also signifies the biblical creation model itself. Pretty amazing, right? So the same people that want you to not believe in the biblical creation model also don't want you to keep Sabbath. You think that's pretty appropriate, right?
It figures.
They want you to not believe you're created. They want you to believe that you live in a completely different creation model than what God describes. And they don't want you to understand the sign of his appointed times, of his Torah, of his ways, and also what he made for where you live. So it seems fitting, since it's the king of lies, the Satan who deceives the whole world, would want you to believe everything opposite the Bible says. So verse 2 says, "For on the first day he created the heavens which are above, and the earth and the waters, and all the spirits which serve before him. The angels of the presence, and the angels of sanctification, the angels of the spirit of fire, and the angels of the spirits of the winds, the angels of the spirits of the clouds, and of darkness, and of snow, and hail, and frost, and the angels of voices, and of thunder, and of lightning, the angels of spirits of cold and heat, of winter, of spring, of autumn, and of summer, and all the spirits of his creatures which are in the heavens and on the earth." And on the earth. Okay. We don't have time. We're going to be doing our best to get through the first week being described in Genesis 1 and 2 within a good 45 minutes to an hour. I did not have time to compare 1 Enoch 72 through 82, which would explain all these different roles of angels, these different spirits.
Right.
These are angels, what we would generically refer to as angels. They all have different jobs. What you're reading, guys, is you're reading the jobs that have been assigned to these angels for how they help maintain the creation model. So it's not just something that he said it and forget it. He actually created ministers, people that serve before him, to keep these things in motion, so that he, obviously, if they failed, they won't fail, but if they somehow failed, the Father could have it kept in motion by his Spirit, but he chose to designate specific individuals that he created, these ministering spirits, these angels, in order to be, as there's a superintendent over this particular part of the creation models. And this is what 1 Enoch 72 through 82 goes into great depth and breaking down those different passages of the sun, the moon, the stars, the winds, and the portals of the winds that have hoarfrost for summer, spring, for all these different concepts.
That actually, in my mind, lends a whole nother level of it makes it even that much more sinister that humans these days are trying to alter the weather and do the geoengineering. Like it's bad enough if it was just set in motion and all of it was just a biological scientific process that just happened on its own. But the fact that the Father ordained angels to be overseers of these processes of the weather, it just makes it even more an act of rebellion that humans try to manipulate that weather.
That's right. Yeah, it's a spiritual battle that we have no clue like how much of a battle it is.
Yeah.
But hopefully we're going to get a greater clue because we dig into the Father's word and see what is actual what and what we experience on the earth. So he goes on to say that these are spirits of cold and heat, of winter, of spring, of autumn, of the summer, and all the spirits of his creatures, which are in the heavens and on the earth. He created the abysses and the darkness, the eventide and the light, that's the night, the dawn and the day, which he prepared in the knowledge of his heart. Amazing. And thereupon he saw his works and praised him. Thereupon we, that's the angel speaking, we saw his works. We praised him and lauded him before him on account of all his works. For 7 great works he did create on the first day. Now this to me is Job chapter 38, verse 7, talking about the angels who praised him while they watched the foundation of the earth being laid and the heavens and the stars and everything like that.
Yeah, what a sight that would have been.
Yeah. So that means, just as it says, and they were one of those 7 works created on the first day. Right. All these angels on the first day. In case you guys are always wondering, where did the water come from in Genesis 1:1 or 1:2? So the Spirit hovered over the waters of the deep. The water was created on day 1.
Right.
So this is where those waters came from as well. Jubilees is helpful in that, breaking that down. So real quick, we'll go over to 2nd Esdras, and we're going to take a quick look at what he says about the first day. It's going to be on the top right here. So here in 2nd Esdras, that's pretty small. Let me try to make that bigger. All right. So here it is, verse 38 is where it starts. And it says, I said, this is High Priest Ezra talking. He says, I said, O Lord, you speak from the beginning of the creation, even the first day, and said thus, let heaven and earth be made. And your word was a perfect work. And then was the spirit, and the darkness and silence were on every side. The sound of men's voices was not yet formed. You commanded a fair light to come forth of your treasures, that your work might appear. So that's his description of Genesis 1's first day event. As you can see, we get a lot more description from Jubilees chapter 2, but I think it's very fitting because he actually walks through each day as well.
Yeah.
So it's very fitting to compare the high priest Esdras' version of this as well. So let's jump back over to Genesis 1 and pick up with day 2, which is going to be here in verse 6. And God said, let there be an expanse. This particular version that I'm using doesn't use the word firmament, but most of them should say firmament. The word expanse in the Greek is stereoma. It's the same definition as the rakia in the Hebrew. It's a solid arch, a solid substance supporting water above it. So this is what we would call the firmament. Many of the King James versions actually use the original word firmament from the Latin firmamenta. So and God said, let there be a firmament between the waters to separate the waters from the waters. So God made the firmament and separated the waters beneath it from the waters above it. And it was so. God called the firmaments sky. Oh, this is a horrible translation.
That is terrible.
This is a horrible translation, isn't it?
I mean, I think all of us know typically it says that God called the firmament heaven, is what that part says.
That's what it actually says. God called the firmament heaven. So, so this is what, we always try to remind folks that the structure that's being created, this firmament, which supports waters above it. So now it divided inside the fish tank. God put a bowl. Imagine like Sandy from SpongeBob, a little raccoon that lived under a bowl.
Squirrel. She was a squirrel.
Excuse me, the squirrel. She lived in a little air pocket under the bowl, right? Yeah. So made a little house for Sandy, which is all of us, and underneath in a flooded area, right, where there's water. And then within that air pocket, now he has open air that he can start forming the land and everything. Yeah. Because he divided the waters from the waters with a firmament. That structure, a firmament, he calls the heaven.
Right.
So I think this is very important for us to remember and consider that the structure is the heaven. This is why it says in the beginning, he created the heavens, plural, and the unformed earth, the earth.
Right.
So as we get more, that Genesis 1:1 is an introductory statement. It's a summary statement. It's not full description. We get the fuller description as we keep reading Genesis 1. And so this is just very important. I think people need to really consider, all the details. You got to take them back to understand. Now we got a definition for what the heaven is. So it means there's plural heavens being made in verse 1. That's where the angels live above us.
Yeah.
Above the watered area that had to be separated with this last firmament so that the dry land could appear.
It's one of the shortest yet one of the most important statements in the scriptures that people glaze right over and forget that definition is the context for every time you hear that word heaven.
That's right.
Spoken of throughout the whole rest of the book.
That's right. It's super important. So we'll look in Jubilees real quick, where it's also talking about the same concept. We'll go to day 2. This is in verse 4. It says, on the second day, he created the firmament in the midst of the waters, and the waters were divided on that day. Half of them went up above, and half of them went down below the firmament that is in the midst over the face of the whole earth. This was the only work God created on the second day. What thoughts come to mind? Because I have some interesting ideas. Unfortunately, West Blaze, I didn't prepare all the wonderful visuals. But guys, you can go to West Blaze Music's channel and you can check out. He's got wonderful visuals on these things. Or go to Messenger of the Most High Facebook page, and he's got a lot of wonderful visuals. I didn't actually pull up a video or have any visuals prepared beyond that. We were just going to do discussion today. But sweetie, when you read verse 4, what do you think comes to mind?
For me, it's just interesting that that's the only quote unquote only thing he did that day. But that seems to be, that must have been a lot of work going into making our firmament, dividing the waters, sending all the waters down underneath the earth, because he created 6 other firmaments on that first day.
On the first day.
So it's just, I just hope we get a replay movie when we get to the kingdom to get to watch all of this.
Well, check out what he says here. It says half of the waters went above, half of them went down. So we see the ones that went down.
Yeah.
Just as much as we see on the earth, is above us still.
Right.
Think about that.
Yeah.
The depths of the oceans,
Yeah.
the depths of, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, honestly, if I wanted to get technical with it, once we get to Genesis 7:11, it may not still be half, since water's flooded down in the earth
True.
from the flood. So I believe the oceans are greater. I believe all the the exterior ice at the outer edge of the circle of the earth that we generically call Antarctica, all that 1 to 2 miles of thick frozen ice that's still from left over from the flood.
Mhm.
And they say if all the ice in Antarctica melted, it would flood most of the cities by like 400 feet on the coastlines of all the nations. And so our interior land would look very different because we would lose, a lot of our coastline, right?
Yeah, and that's based on their false model even.
Right. But the point is
the proverbial they say
yeah.
that, and they
Yeah.
believe in that, small little continent at the bottom of the globe.
Yeah, but I'm just talking about the volume of water as far as
Yeah.
half and half.
Yeah.
I don't mean personally if I wanted to go into details, but we're not trying to do a deep dive there at that sticking point. But just if I want to go into details, you would have to counter in that some of the half that was above in the beginning then came down with the flood,
right,
to the windows of the firmament, as Genesis 7:11 talks about. So it wouldn't exactly be half anymore, but there is still a sea hanging above us. This is the sea that gets removed, dissipated. Something happens with it. It gets reallocated, if you will, in Revelation 21:1-3, so that the New Jerusalem can come back down through the firmament. So this is why it says there's no longer a sea up there. This is why the Testament of Levi does directly tell you in chapter 2 there is a sea hanging above us in the firmament above us.
So when Levi asks us that inevitable question, Daddy, why is the sky blue? We're going to have an interesting answer, right? Is it because there's water up there?
No.
Or is it because the firmament itself is blue?
I don't know if it's because there's water up there. I think whenever people send up high altitude balloons, I think it's a part of how the sun reacts. It does
get dark up there, yeah.
I think it's how the sun reacts to the oxygen layer that's over the surface of the earth. Oxygen is heavier, in its molecular weights compared to nitrogen, argon, neon, hydrogen. And so those things float above. The oxygen hangs out at the bottom. The oxygen is only about 21% of the overall atmosphere, according to most agreed upon calculations. And so that is what gives that light blue hue from the sun shining on it. And so that's why when you see those high altitude, 100,000 feet weather balloons that go up, they go above the blue and there's darkness.
Yeah, it gets dark up there.
And so there's a part in Job where he talks about the darkness that hides the Father and above us. And so anyway, that gets a little deeper. That's a great thought, baby.
Well, you'll obviously have a good answer for him.
I will have a very thorough answer.
Very different from what he'd get at school.
Yeah. So anyway, but let's get back to the text real quick. So the point is, a whole bunch of water is above us. And that's why there's a firmament there to hold it up. That's the whole point, is that it's literally holding it up. This is why the word in Hebrew, shamayim, means a covering of water. So there's water above us, and it's the same water that we have here. This is why this verse is saying, on this day, the same body of water that was there got divided. And that's water's above us and water's below us. Now, I'm guessing that the water above us is probably pure. It doesn't have any type of, soil sediment in it and all the stuff that our water, you know what I'm saying? It's probably there's no pollution, there's no plastic, there's no dead fish popping up or nothing like that. But the point is, there's water above us that was there from the original point of creation. So there's something to keep in mind. It's interesting. Now let's look at 2nd Esdras real quick. He also talks about day 2 and the firmament. A lot of people like to see 2 or 3 verses to support an idea. And so here we're going to give 2 or 3. So on day 2, verse 41, it says, upon the 2nd day you made the spirit of the firmaments and commanded it to part asunder and to make a division between the waters, that one part might go up and the other remain beneath. Now this is fascinating to me because did you guys hear that motorcycle go by? What do we talk about as what lives in heaven above, like Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 15? Things above are spiritual. Things on the earth are of earth. Mm-hmm. And he's calling this the spirit of the firmaments. Isn't that interesting? So to me, this is perfectly in alignment with Revelation 22, where it says, the Spirit and the bride say, come. Now, I know a lot of people say, oh, there's the Holy Spirit. How dare you, Sean? Yes, but I'm also trying to show you that there's the idea of the everything in heaven above that is listed off is considered of the spiritual nature. And this is not a undefined non-corporeal concept. Every spiritual thing has some sort of tangibility to it. Right? The spiritual concept, and this is, I'm not trying to go into Trinitarian arguments. I know they like to say, well, then that must mean that God's spirit has a body and is its own separate person. And I'm like, that's a little bit different context. That's not the way it's described. But I'm talking about things that are created in heaven above are referred to as spiritual nature. So this is where it's a different type of creation, if you will, than here. And this is the high priest Ezra in the 5th century BC is attributing the firmament itself, this solid structure, to being of a spirit. That makes perfect sense with at the resurrection, we'll be born of the spirit and be called spiritual nature, glorified, resurrected. We'll have a real body. We can be touched, just like the firmament can be touched. It's a real structure that supports waters above it, but it's referred to with the descriptor of spirits. That makes perfect sense because it's literally of the heaven above. Right? This is consistent with how Paul's defining the two different things between heaven and earth. So very interesting. I thought this is a very wonderful descriptor here. Well, let's go back to Genesis real quick, and we'll look at day 3. So here in Genesis on day 3, we'll go to the dry ground. Verse 9 says, God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place. Let the dry land appear, and it was so. God called the dry land earth, and gathered together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herbs yielding seed after its kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. I think grass is probably one of the most overlooked beneficial things that is considered an herb by the Father. Think about all the different types of grass that we can use for medicines in different ways.
That's true.
Even dandelion, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we've been learning more about it.
Remember? Yeah, I don't know if it's a grass. I think it's a flower, but
okay, yes, but what grows in the grass are all the flowers of the earth.
Yes.
Right? They're cultivated with the grass, and the grass itself is used for food by other creatures on the earth. And there's different types of grass that you can use for healing and medicines.
Yeah, I mean, grass-fed meat is incredibly healthy for the body. I mean, even our dogs go out and eat the grass. And actually, I found out that you can grow a kind of grass called cat grass in your house year-round for your dogs to eat.
Okay.
Because there's nutrients in it that they get. It's not always because they have an upset tummy. Like, they actually eat grass because there's nutrients in it that their bodies need. Yeah. So I've thought about growing a little pan of it, because we definitely lose all our grass in the winter.
Yeah, but think about modern culture teaches you grass either needs to be not walked on and pristine and trimmed and artificially, sodded and treated and all this stuff, or it's just considered a nuisance and there's,
Yes, a lot of places out here in the West, because of drought, I use those quotes purposefully. Yeah. They encourage people to rip up all their grass and put gravel down for their yards so that they don't have anything that needs to be watered, which I always thought was weird, but that's because I'm from Ohio and we have an overabundance of grass in Ohio. So when I moved out west and saw these gravel yards, I'm like, how do you call that a yard? But
yeah,
it's a side topic.
Yeah, so this is why it's not good to put stuff on your grass, because animals eat it, your dogs might eat it.
Yeah.
And the dogs know, whenever one of them has an upset tummy, they know exactly which grass they're looking for to help them to clear out whatever's troubling their stomach.
Yeah, they look for a certain kind. It's interesting.
It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. So let's go over to Jubilees real quick, and we'll check out what they say about day 3 in Jubilees chapter 2. So it says here, on the third day, verse 5, on the third day, God commanded the waters to pass from off the face of the whole earth into one place, and the dry land to appear. And the waters did so as he commanded them. And they retired from off the face of the earth into one place outside of this firmament, and the dry land appeared. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So this is where I would say, there's a lot of people that, well, hang on, let me finish reading verse 7. And on that day, he created for them all the seas according to their separate gathering places, and all the rivers, and the gatherings of the waters, and the mountains, and all the earth, and all the lakes, and all the dew of the earth, and the seed which is sown, and all the sprouting things, and the fruit-bearing trees, and the trees of the wood, and the garden of Eden in Eden, and all the plants after their kind. These 4 great works God created on the third day. And on the third day, he created the sun, the moon, and the stars.
Fourth day.
I'm sorry. They had this verse broken up weird. I'm sorry. So just the first sentence of verse 8. These 4 great works God created on the third day. Now, a lot of people get confused by this, and they're like asking why they don't read verse 7. They stop at verse 6, and they think, oh, why is this stuff taken off outside the firmament? That's because he created a firmament to separate the waters. There's water now outside the firmament and inside the firmament. Verse 7 explains the water inside the firmament.
Right.
Okay. Thank you for the super chat, Taking Back Eden. FE, appreciate that. Thank you so much. So let's look at 2nd Esdras and what he has to say about day 3. So the high priest Ezra, he goes on to say, verse 42, upon the third day you did command that the waters should be gathered in the 7th part of the earth. 6 parts you dried up and kept them, to the intent that of these some being planted of God and tilled might serve you. For as soon as your word went forth, the work was made. For immediately there was great and innumerable fruit, many and diverse pleasures for the taste, and flowers of unchangeable color, and odors of wonderful smell. And this was done the third day. So my conversation earlier kind of jumped ahead because I know that 2nd Ezra talks about flowers with the grass being created. Genesis talks just grass. 2nd Ezra expounds with flowers. Okay. But also look at this in verse 42. Upon the third day, you did command the waters should be gathered in the 7th part of the earth. 6 parts have you dried up and kept them, to the intent that some of these being planted of God and tilled might serve you. This is consistent with Jubilees. What Jubilees just described about the waters on the earth being put into one place, and then the rivers and seas and everything were created. So it seems as if before the flood, there was a lot more land visible, and the waters connected to what we call the seas that become rivers and streams throughout as it moves through the land, that by portion it was a lot less.
Right.
So 6 parts of the earth were inhabitable. The 7th part, if you broke up the land mass of the earth, 6/7 of it would have been inhabitable. 1/7 of it would have been waters, seas, rivers, and lakes and things like that. But after the flood, now there's a lot less inhabitable land, a lot more water, right? So it's very interesting concepts. We're going to be trying to portray something like that in the days of Noah throughout the series, just to show you there was definitely a different world back then. So this is fascinating, just that the flood did dramatically change how we view the creation from our perspective on the earth.
Right.
And I think that I also too am excited when the Father comes, so we can see what the earth may have looked like before the flood.
Yeah.
Because I think it's definitely different after the flood for sure. So let's look at day 4 in Genesis chapter 1. All right. So on the 4th day, verse 14, God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night. Let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. Let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. God made 2 great lights, the great light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, to divide the light from the darkness. God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the 4th day. This is amazing. I already, I did a video a couple weeks ago. God's law is eternal. I talked about Genesis 1:14 and what's called the signs and seasons. That's the word moedim. That actually means for sacred times, the appointed seasons, the actual festivals of the Lord. And so this is where we see in Leviticus 23, it then expounds upon what the appointed times of the Lord are. They're Sabbaths. So in addition to what we're going to read in Genesis 2:1-3 about the weekly Sabbath, the Father is now introducing here in Genesis 1:14 that he set the sun, moon, and stars in concordance with his eternal festival Sabbaths. Also, in addition with the weekly Sabbath, because there is an accounting of every 7 days, we get the weekly Sabbath, and that, you count the days of the year with the sun and the moon.
Right.
So this is where it's a beautiful moment, just in case anyone has never realized that the actual creation model is tied to the Sabbaths of God. We already talked about this previously in Genesis, in Jubilees chapter 2, talking about day 2. Day 1, the creation, that 7 works were done. And then this is why the Sabbath is considered the number 7 and is tied to the creation itself as a sign. In the same way, the feasts, which are called Sabbaths of God, the festival days, are also tied to the actual creation model itself. So this would be much more fitting why Yeshua in Matthew 5 would say that he did not come to abolish, but to fulfill, which means to do, to fully preach,
Right.
that not one jot or tittle will be removed from the law until heaven and earth is passed, until all is accomplished and heaven and earth is passed.
Right.
So heaven and earth is not going away anywhere. It was created and established in a concordance with God's instructions, his law, both for behavior as well as for signs.
Right.
Which the Sabbath, the weekly and the festivals throughout the year, those are also Sabbaths. They're all called signs. So this is why it's not an arbitrary thing. It's not ceremonial, as certain Protestant pastors tried to label it back in the day. It's not just for Jews. It's literally for creation. It's for the Father. The angels in heaven abide by the same signs and festivals. Everything in creation, especially men on the earth, who are lower than authority than those in heaven, also should abide by what the Father established as his signs. So his Sabbaths, both weekly and festivals, are directly attached to the creation model. They're never going away. This is why when he brings his house in Isaiah 66 down to the earth, all nations will come to him on his Sabbaths to worship him because they'll be in covenant with him. So just something to keep in mind. I won't go too deep on that.
Yeah, another thing just that stands out to me about this part of the account of creation is that this means that time is a fixed thing. It's not just when I was a New Ager, oh man, the idea of time is a man-made construct. No, time is a fixed element of creation. And so when you see all of these people speculating about the proverbial they messing with the timeline or time travel, or some of my friends, bless their hearts, have made posts about, does anyone else feel like time is speeding up? Like things are just going faster? And I'm like, look, I've just always heard that as you age, it feels like time goes faster. You just, because when you're a kid, it feels like it's going to take forever until you're an adult. But then once you're an adult, you're distracted living life and being responsible and adulting all the time. And yeah, the days start to fly by, but that's a normal part of aging. Time is a fixed concept. Nobody can plug something into the Father's creation itself and make the clock start moving faster. It's just part of aging. So if you've ever felt like, oh man, what, the days just fly by. I mean, that's just normal. It's just a normal part of getting older and getting caught up doing all the stuff, the mundane stuff you have to do every day to maintain your life. So,
yeah. So let's look real quick about the fourth day and how Jubilees 2 describes it. So this is going to be on verse 8, the second sentence in verse 8. And on the fourth day, he created the sun and moon and stars, set them in the firmament of the heaven, to give light upon all the earth, to rule over the day and the night, and divide the light from the darkness. Now, some people in the biblical cosmological crowd, they will say, oh, well, look, this must mean he's underneath the firmament directly above us. But yet, as we try to explain in the past 30 minutes, God created multiple firmament layers above us. The seventh and last one was created on the second day. That's the one that directly encloses us, that we can't measure the height of because we're mankind, according to Scripture, according to Jeremiah.
right.
So, and the number of the firmaments, that's a whole different conversation. We go over that in great detail in other videos. I don't want to get stuck on that today. But if you want to Google and YouTube, uncommon ground, sky's the limit, we go over the scriptures that talk about the different number of firmaments above us, totaling in 7. So the last and 7th firmament was created on day 2. That's the one that encapsulates us. But the sun, moon, and stars being mentioned here on day 4 are not set underneath the firmament directly above us. It's in the layers of the firmament above us. Promise you guys, if the sun, moon, and stars were literally below our firmament, the nations of the earth would have already shot rockets at it until they destroyed them.
Yeah.
Like it would have been
Yeah.
constant, right? So this is why the stars that are falling at the return of Messiah is because the firmament's rolled open like a scroll. And so then you see their stars falling down to the earth. This is why the luminaries have to be renewed, according to Jubilees in certain passages. It's another study. I'm just teasing some things. Just keep this in mind. It all works together. It's very, very synchronized in the story it's telling. It's very logical as far as a engineering specs. And this is what the Father teaches for what he made. So this is why it goes on in verse 9 that God appointed the sun to be a great sign on the earth for days and for Sabbaths and for months and for feasts and for years, for Sabbaths of years, for Jubilees and for all seasons of the year. Now, a lot of people don't like this because they think, oh, what about the moon? I thought the moon and the stars were for that. That's what Genesis 1 says. It's also what the Psalm says at one point, right? It's also what Sirach mentions, and I think it's Sirach 43, talks about the moon as a sign for seasons. Yes, you can use them all in conjunctions. This is what Jubilees later says in chapter 6 about the moon not being properly calculated, and therefore people are making the wrong day a feast day. The same thing is mentioned in First Enoch, where it talks about how to calculate the sun and moon together, not individually, but together. This particular passage does focus on Jubilees and talking about the sun, which is the head of the luminaries, as First Enoch describes. Again, we must take all of Scripture together. We can't just take one passage and then make doctrine out of it or try to refute doctrine out of one passage. You must take all of Scripture and harmonize it together. This is standard. When you're reading multiple books that all talk about the same topic, this is a standard practice, okay? So a lot of people get triggered over Jubilees because they say, oh, well, it's only mentioning the moon. What about the sun and the stars?
You mean it's only mentioning
Excuse
the
me,
sun.
it's only mentioning the sun. Jubilees does mention the moon later. And it's consistent. When it does mention the moon later, it also talks about 364 being the number of days of the year, just like Enoch does, as both Enoch and Jubilees describe how to calculate for the moon and how it doesn't follow the sun exactly. Enoch goes on to describe the sun and how you calculate for that so that it can also be together with the calculations for the moon. You can understand the course of the year. So this is why we can't take one passage from Jubilees 2:9 and say that Jubilees is teaching something different than the rest of Scripture. So with that said, this is what's being said on day 4.
Well, and the reality is that ultimately it is the sun that tells us when a new day is starting.
Right, that's right.
So all the Sabbaths and the Jubilees, and those are all made up of days. A Sabbath is a day. A Jubilees is a collection of days,
Right.
So ultimately, no matter.
Right, so when the evening time comes and the sun sets, we don't say, oh, the new day has begun because the moon set.
Right.
Or because the moon
or
came
because
out.
the moon is out. Yeah, because
it's
there's times where the moon isn't out.
The whole concept of the evening is when the sun is setting.
Right.
Not the moon appearing.
Right.
The moon can be throughout the day or the night. It goes at a different pace than the sun in the circumference of the heaven. So this is why, that's a great point, sweetie. This is why even the word evening time is based on the sun, and that is the calculation of days. So therefore, they are synchronous. It does work together. Moon and sun both can be looked at, counted for understanding the observances of the Sabbaths and the festivals. So it's not a problem. Verse 10 says, it divided the light from the darkness for prosperity, that all things may prosper which shoot and grow on the earth. These 3 kinds he made on the 4th day. Okay, very interesting. So let's go to 2nd Esdras and read about the 4th day. Verse 45. It says on verse 45, upon the 4th day you commanded that the sun should shine, that the moon give her light, and the stars should be in order, and gave them charge to do service unto man that was to be made. Very interesting, very short.
Yeah.
Synonymous with what Christ says in Matthew 24 about the moon not giving her light on the day of the Lord. So it provides this female pronoun, anthropomorphic female pronoun to the moon, which is interesting because the sun in Psalm 19:7 is given a male pronoun. He runs his race comes out of his chamber like a bridegroom. So it's the sun is also referred to as a he in First Enoch as well. So because he is the more dominant of the luminaries.
Right.
The moon has a seventh portion of light than the sun. The sun shines 7 times brighter than the moon, and the moon actually gets the power of its light not through reflection. It's not heliocentrism. Rocks don't reflect sunlight. Not like that. Not pale rocks without metallic minerals in them.
Yeah.
So it's not the reflection. It's the moon actually charges up and it waxes and wanes. It actually grows in light, as First Enoch describes, and then it diminishes in light over time throughout the course of its month. So this is where it is a lesser light, as Genesis 1 describes it, than the sun. Does that make sense? And all of them were to do service in the man.
Right.
So these are, again, it's shine down on the earth for lights down up on the earth. The layers of the firmament above in the heaven do not need the light of the sun and the moon. So it's something to keep in mind. We'll go back to Genesis and look at day 5 real quick. So here in, here in day 5, verse 20, God said, "Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and the fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of the heaven." So there's that word again, denoting the open firmament. This is the only time the word open firmament is used, because it's not enclosed by other firmaments. It's between the earth and the heaven. It's generically called the sky. It's where the birds fly, but it's between the exterior circumference of the firmament. So therefore, it's considered the open firmament of the heaven. Sometimes it's even called the face of the heaven, right? Because it's the part that we see when looking up at the body of the heaven above us. Verse 21 says, "And God created great whales and every living creature that moves, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good." Now, this is the translation decision to call it whales, but we're going to see in 2 Esdras 6, just like 1 Enoch 69, it's actually the day that Leviathan and Behemoth were created.
Interesting.
Which was on day 5. And I guess I kind of skipped over day 3 on 2 Esdras chapter 6. I read it, but I didn't really comment on it. But on day 3 in 2 Esdras 6, that is when the Garden of Eden was planted in the earth.
Right.
On day 3. Okay. So just in case you guys are wondering where the Garden of Eden come from, it was planted. That means something put down from above into the ground. Planted, that's what planting means. You plant something in the earth. It was planted on day 3, according to 2 Esdras. That we read that. We just didn't comment too much. So let's go to and I'll just read verse 22. "God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, fill the waters and the seas, and let fowl multiply on the earth. And the evening and the morning were the 5th day." So this is why everything's going to come forth after its kind. This is a wonderful refutation against evolution. And I think Kent Hovind did a great job in a lot of his debates in early years, bringing out this point that all these things are bringing forth abundantly according to their own kind. And this is why both in the sea and on the land, they had their own kinds from which they brought forth afterwards. There's no evolution here, guys. There's no biological evolution within the framework of theology, and it's not borrowing from Sumerian tales. This is literally the Father creating different species in different parts of the earth, both water and sea, and then they bring forth after their own kind. There's never any cross species of kind that then reproduce further kinds. A kind is a category, and there's species within the kind.
Yeah, and that passage is interesting because it talks about the waters bringing forth these particular animals that he's listing out. But then when we get to day 6, we're going to see it's the earth bringing forth those creatures. So there's no primordial soup happening here where everything just comes out of some big stew of, I don't know, loose genetics or something.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how they really break down those details when you get down into it, but it's not primordial soup bringing forth the fowl of the air and the fish of the sea.
So we'll go to Jubilees 2 real quick, and we'll look at day 6 or day 5, excuse me. So this is a second sentence in verse 11. It says, "And on the 5th day, he created great sea monsters in the depths of the waters. For these were the first things of flesh that were created by his hands, the fish and everything that moves in the waters, and everything that flies, the birds and all their kind." So it's very interesting. Again, we're going to read in 2 Esdras 6, the parallel to this. It talks about Leviathan, Behemoth. Verse 12, "The sun rose above them to prosper them, and above everything that was on the earth, everything that shoots out of the earth, and all fruit-bearing trees and all flesh. These 3 kinds he created on the 5th day." All right. Jubilees is consistent as well with this creation. We'll go to 2nd Esdras chapter 6, and we'll look further details on the creation. Verse 47 says, Upon the 5th day you said to the 7th part, where the waters were gathered, that it should bring forth living creatures, fowls and fishes. And so it came to pass. For the dumb water and without life brought forth living things at the commandment of God, that all people might praise your wondrous works. Then did you ordain 2 living creatures, the one you called Enoch, that's the behemoth, and the other Leviathan. You did separate the one from the other, for the 7th part, namely, where the waters was gathered together, might not hold them both. Unto Enoch you gave 1 part, which was dried up the 3rd day, that he should dwell in the same part, whereon are 1,000 hills. But unto Leviathan you gave the 7th part, namely the moist, and has kept him to the devoured, and has kept him to be devoured, of whom you will and when. So this is without doing a whole nother thing on Leviathan. These Leviathan specifically, but I would also say the behemoth, were specifically created for a time in the future where they will be eaten. So if you want to go check out Honor of Kings on Kingdom in Context. Put in the YouTube search bar Honor of Kings, Leviathan and Behemoth, and you'll see some interesting presentations we've done breaking that down in Honor of Kings series. All right, so let's look in Genesis 1 on day 6 when mankind is made. Verse 24, God said, Let the earth bring forth a living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and the beast of the earth after his kind. And it was so. God made the beast of the earth after his kind, the cattle after their kind, and everything that creeps upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good.
I always like to point this verse out for people who try to argue that mankind was not created to eat meat, and meat wasn't created to eat, that certain animals weren't created to be eaten, because he clearly differentiates cattle from the beasts of the earth.
That's right.
And we all know cattle is specific kinds of animals that clearly are domesticated, and they're part of the practice of husbandry that mankind does. This is cows, sheep, goats. I would put deer and other more wild, clean animals into that same category, but he's differentiating cattle from the beasts of the earth. So I've always found that to be an interesting differentiation that people kind of glaze over.
That's right. So he goes on to say in verse 26, God said, Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female, he them. Some he, him, some pronoun games. Verse 28, And God blessed them and said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air, over every living thing that moves upon the earth. And God said, Behold, I've given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree, and which is the fruit of tree yielding seed, to you shall be for meat, to every beast of the earth, and every fowl of the air, and everything that creeps upon the earth, where there is life. I have given every green herb for meat. It was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the 6th day. Now, a lot of people love to say, because again, I try to share with this is a summary statement. Genesis 1 is a summary statement. So a lot of people like to use this passage and say, look, a whole different mankind was made on day 6, male and female. It's different than Adam and Eve, because Genesis 2 talks about Adam being made. And I'm like, guys, no, it's just backing up and re-explaining this, where it quickly skipped over the creation process of man and woman. Genesis 2 goes into greater depth of that creation process. Same thing with Jubilees chapter 2 or chapter 3. Jubilees chapter 3 goes into greater depth about the time of how Adam was made, how long he existed on the earth before brought into the Garden of Eden, and same thing with Eve. She was pulled from his rib on the 6th day of the 2nd week, and she wasn't directly made on the same day that Adam was.
Yeah, a lot of people also like to use that part to argue that the father is not actually our father. He's some androgynous transgender, I don't know what they would call it, two sex. I'm sure they have a term for someone who's both genders now, or he'd be non-binary or something, because it says that he created mankind in his image. And then it goes on to say that he created male and female. But if you look at the first part, it says he created him.
Right.
God created man in his image. God created him. Then there's another summary statement, male and female, God created them. So after he created him, Adam, then he created Eve from Adam. So this is, and I've actually seen some of the Trinitarians go that route of being like, oh, well, see, how can you say God has a body? Because look right here, he creates, if we're created in his image and we look like him, then what about women? Does that mean he's also a woman? It's like,
again, this is why I say it's a summary statement. We get more detail fleshed out. There's lots of things in scripture that are mentioned briefly. Other passages and other books, other prophets flesh out those details with greater understanding. In Genesis 1, all you have to do is read the next chapter to see those details fleshed out greater, to see, oh, he created mankind, he created them in his image. That's fine. But then you get the details of when they're created, how they're created, and it's not an androgynous God.
Oh, you mean Genesis 2 isn't a whole new creation account?
No.
A whole second creation?
Not at all. So let's go check out Jubilees and see what they have to say about day 6. I don't know why it keeps doing that every time I switch this one. All right. So this will pick up in, I think it's verse 13, the second sentence. It says, on the 6th day, he created all the animals of the earth, all the cattle and everything that moves on the earth. After all this, he created man. A man and a woman created he them, and gave him dominion over all that is upon the earth and in the seas, and over everything that flies, and over the beasts, and over the cattle, over everything that moves on the earth, over the whole earth. And over this he gave him, that's mankind, dominion. Over these 4 kinds he created, and these 4 kinds he created on the 6th day. And there were altogether 22 kinds. And he finished all his work on the 6th day, all that is in the heavens, and all and on the earth, and in the seas, and in the abysses, and in the light, and in the darkness, and in everything. And he gave us a great sign, the Sabbath day. Well, that would go into day 7, so I'll stop right there. So, again, read Jubilees 3 to see it go back and back up a little bit and explain more about Adam and Eve being created and all the whens and the hows and the whys. So this is why we have to read the fullness. This is what we do when we find context. We compare with other chapters, or we read the rest of the chapter, or we keep reading. If anyone is interested, we've put out a video on our channel. It's called 10 Easy Ways to Find Context. So you can put in the YouTube search bar, Kingdom in Context, 10 Easy Ways to Find Context. And I walk you through a quick little list on how you can develop your mind and your brain when reading the Bible to use normal comprehension skills like you would with any other piece of literature that the devil doesn't want you to use when reading the Bible. Very basic reading comprehension reminders, loving reminders of how to find context when studying Scripture. This is one of the biggest ones I come across continually as someone that constantly teaches the Bible online. People bring me Genesis 1 and 2 and say, there's 2 creations. There's a whole Adamic race. Look at this. There were Neanderthal people. There's Cro-Magnon peoples. There was monkey men peoples. And they have all these wild theories, since the Bible doesn't say any of that stuff. They have all these wild theories about what possibly this pre-Adamic race was. It's rough. 10 easy ways to find context. YouTube search bar. You'll love it. So let's look real quick in 2nd Esdras and what he says about the 6th day as well. We're going to be here in verse 53. Upon the 6th day you gave commandment unto the earth, that before you it should bring forth beasts, cattle, and creeping things. And after these, Adam also, whom you made Lord of all your creatures. And of him come we all. So from him come we all. And the people also whom you've chosen. All this I've spoken before you, O Lord, because you made the world for our sakes. As for the other people, which also come out of Adam, you have said that they are nothing, but be like unto spittle, and have likened the abundance of them unto a drop that falleth from a vessel. And now, Lord, behold, these heathen, which you have been reputed as nothing, have begun to be lords over us and to devour us. All right, so this goes into a little bit more further. But the point is, he's referencing the first day. We all come from Adam. Obviously, those who reject him are not chosen, right? That's the simplest part of the chosen part. It doesn't mean predetermination, doesn't mean predestination. It's not tulip, it's not Calvinism, it's not racism. It's simply basically if you reject Christ, you won't be chosen for the elect of the resurrection. If you reject God, the Father or the Son, you'll be considered as spittle. You'll be set apart for destruction.
Ezra also seems to be confirming here that there is no pre-Adamic race.
That's right.
Like,
All come from
all
Adam.
come from Adam.
All come from Adam. Good. Yeah, I was going to get there. That's a great point. And so this is very important that he made the world for our sakes. Verse 55. What does evolution tell you? Evolution tells you that you are an accident that's on the earth and you need to serve the earth.
Yeah.
That everything you need to do is to protect Mother Earth. That you need to climate conserve. Now, I'm not saying we abuse the creation. I'm just saying the narrative,
stewards.
the same people that tell you don't believe in God also tell you that you're made to serve the earth. They say it backwards, guys. But the scriptures tell us the earth, the luminaries, everything was made to minister to us, to be a service to us. This is why we're given lordship over all the things created on the earth. Not over the sun, moon, and the stars, because remember, they're in the heaven, but over all the things on the earth. This is why when we obey the commandments of God, we can then work miracles on the earth. Christ exemplified this everywhere he went. Okay? So this is why evolution is such a doctrine of demons. It is the opposite, the antithesis of scriptural statements. It is the opposite. It subjugates you to the creation, and to which there are lots of gods who want to fill that void of the voice of creation, right? They'll tell you that they are the representation of the creation as a false god. So this is why the ancient cultures all attributed parts of creation to a false god. So then they could give voice to your subjugation to that part of the creation. So this is a way of control and manipulation, a doctrine of demons. This is why we believe the scriptures about the creation model, not a sun worship model. It's called heliocentrism. The earth was not made to serve the sun. The sun is serving the earth. This is the whole point. This is the whole point, guys, of the scriptures that tell us the truth of who we are, how we were made, where we are. People always go crazy about identity videos. It blows my mind. They want to know. They're fascinated with any video that has to do with identity. I'm reading you your identity. You were made on the earth by the creator of heaven and earth. All the things in the creation were made to serve you. Even the angels, the ministering angels we read in Jubilees chapter 2, the one that Job 38 talks about, they're made to serve you, according to Hebrews 1:14. Your destined promise, according to the creator of heaven and earth, is that you will then be made in greater authority than even the ministering servants of heaven in the future, and you'll get to live in the Father's house, which comes down out of heaven to the earth, that you get to cohabitate inside of. That is a promise not given to anyone else in all the creation. The lies of the enemy wants you to believe everything opposite of what we've been reading to you. We've been reading to you your identity in the Father from the beginning, stated openly and blatantly by Moses, by Genesis, by 2nd Esdras, the high priest Ezra. Men that were prophets of God, giving the words of the Father through the prophets, just like Hebrews 1 says, so that you can understand who you are, why you're created, why your life has purpose, and what you're expected to do while you're here. It's very, very important. So let's take a quick look at Genesis chapter 2, as we're going to go into the last seventh day. So in Genesis 2, it says that the heavens and the earth were finished and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. So when we read in the New Testament, it says that we practice our sanctification in Christ. That's a word that means that we adopt our behavior to the behavior of the Father and the Son. Right? This is the idea of discipleship. It's sanctification process. We're being sanctified, as the New Testament talks about, as we do the good works, the commandments of God in faith through Christ. This is the idea. He's our high priest. He's our authority. He's our Lord, our master, our king, our redeemer. We disciple after his behavior. And in doing so, it's called sanctification. In Genesis 1:3, Yahweh, the creator of heaven and earth, told you that observing the Sabbath is a part of sanctification. He sanctified this day. He also connected, like we already talked about in Jubilees 2, he connected it to as a sign of the creation. It's also a sign of the Sabbaths and festivals, which he later says, do those as well, because it will be holy for you if you do them. You'll be set apart. That's a part of your sanctification, is practicing the set apart ways of the Father. So this is why it's not just for Jews. It's for all mankind. It's right here in Genesis chapter 2, 1-3. For all mankind, the Father himself observes Sabbath. What level of arrogance do we have to think that we don't need to do the actual behavior the Father himself does? It blows my mind. When he says, hey, I do this, I would like you to do this too. And by the way, what is the actual action he's asking you to do? Hardly anything. Don't do anything.
That's the most confusing one for me that people reject. It's like he's literally just asking you to take a day off from work.
It's
how can that be considered a now? Look, I understand that the Judaism took that command and beat it to death with their how do we really do this? What are all the things we can and can't do? And what does he really mean when he says such and such? That sure, some people can look at how Judaism keeps the Sabbath and think, gosh, that sounds like a burden. But if you just let the text speak for itself, it's very simple. It's very simple.
This is why Christ reprimanded them and said, quoting Isaiah, who also was reprimanding bad priests of Isaiah's day, Yeshua was quoting Isaiah to reprimand the Pharisees and say, you teach the doctrines of men as the precepts of the Lord. Yeah. So this is where, literally man-made traditions, man-made teachings, pet doctrines, has been a problem for mankind forever.
Right.
Forever. They are not satisfied with the actual words of the Father, and they want to make up their own. This is 100% a part of sinfulness of mankind. So when we see anyone, believer, unbeliever, atheist, Muslim, Hindu, anyone, says that the Sabbath of God is not good, we don't have to do that. Not only are they highly deceived, they're in error, but it's literally advocating that they know better than the Creator who made them. This is the Creator said when he gave us his instructions that they're his ways that he made known to us on the earth through his prophets, his own behaviors. It is, to me, it's the epitome of arrogance to say, not only will you not do what he's asked you, but that what he's asked you was bad.
Yeah.
That you've declared, because that's called a judgment. You've made judgment against the Father's judgment. The Father already made a decision. It's called a judgment, right? The Father, that's why Psalm 119 says his judgments are forever.
Right.
He's already made a decision, guys. He's already decided the matter for you. The judgment of the Lord is that the Sabbath day is the seventh day of the week, that we should just take off and rest and chill. That's his judgment. So when we, as fallible, very limited and unknowledgeable humans, come along and try to say, oh, that we don't have to do that because that wasn't for us. Or you don't have to do that because it's a burden. You are making a judgment against the Father's already determined judgment. You are trying to say you know better than the Father. It is the epitome of arrogance and pride. So I think it's it would serve us well to take seriously the scriptures for what they say. Genesis 2, 1-3, Yahweh himself. So Yahweh himself observes the Sabbath. That means he observes it in heaven. Right. Pretty amazing, right? Yeah. Do you think everyone else that is in heaven that worship Yahweh also observes the Sabbath? Or do they just say, man, why doesn't he do anything today? What's going on? God's not doing anything today.
No,
We should be
sure
doing
they
stuff.
walk up to him and say, hey, didn't you hear that Jesus freed us from this, Father? Why are you still burning yourself?
Yeah, did the angels walk up to God in heaven and say, hey, isn't this just for Jews on the earth?
Who bewitched you, Lord?
What are you doing, God? Why are you keeping the Sabbath in heaven?
Hey, Father, haven't you read Galatians?
Yeah, the angels go up to him and hand him Galatians. That'd be hilarious. It'd be hilarious. So yeah, guys, this is not just an arbitrary command. This is the Father himself is doing this stuff.
Yeah.
So let's read here in about the Sabbath in Jubilees chapter 2, and it goes into greater depth as far as the significance of it. So it says, verse 17, he gave us a great sign, the Sabbath day, that we should work 6 days, but keep the Sabbath on the seventh day from all work. And all the angels of the presence, all the angels of sanctification, these two great classes, He has instructed, that's what the word bidden means. He has instructed us to keep the Sabbath with him in heaven and on earth. Right? So we were being tongue in cheek. We're doing a bit just a minute ago, but Jubilees tells us the answer.
Yeah.
All of heaven keeps the Sabbath. Are we better than the angels? All of heaven keeps the Sabbath.
Yeah.
Mankind on the earth, everyone who wants to be in covenant with God, who wants to observe the sign of the Sabbath, acknowledging that he is the creator of heaven and earth. This is why in Exodus 20, I think it's verse 6, when it talks about the Sabbath day, it says, for in 6 days God created the heaven and the earth, and on the seventh he rested. It connects the creation model to the Sabbath, being repeated again. Genesis 1, Jubilees 2 says the Sabbath is a sign of the creation is connected to his Sabbaths. It's permanent. It's never going away, guys. This is why the enemy rails against it so much. It's never going away. He doesn't want you to know that where you live and that the luminaries are instructed for your obedience to his days of rest. The enemy wants you to be confused and working yourself to death. Bars. Don't hate the player, hate the game. So this is the whole point. The Father, everyone in heaven keeps the Sabbath. Verse 18, all the angels of the presence, all the angels of sanctification, these two great classes he instructed to keep the Sabbath with them in heaven and on the earth. The angels of sanctification are all the angels that come on the earth, Hebrews 1:14.
Right.
These are all the angels. So there's two classes of angels, it seems as far as job position.
Mm-hmm.
There's some that are directly a part of his presence, and there's others that are more like the workhorse, right? They're all working in some regard, but I mean, like, they're the rest of them. And then you've got the archangels and some of the Ophanim and the Cherubim and things like that. Verse 19, behold, I will separate myself a people from among all the peoples, and these shall keep the Sabbath day, and I will sanctify them unto myself as my people, and will bless them as I've sanctified the Sabbath day, and do sanctify it unto myself. Even so, I will bless them, and they shall be my people, and I will be their God. Just in case you're wondering, is it still a burden to keep the Sabbath? God's saying, in addition to Genesis 2:3, where he sanctified it, now he's explaining the sanctification in Jubilees 2:19, that it's intended for a blessing for you. It's not a burden. God doesn't change his mind on how things happen. He said from the beginning, this is a blessing. He did not change his mind ever. It's still a blessing. It's not a burden to you to just rest one day out of the week. He's going on to further explain that this is something that he decided for those who want to be in covenant with him. This is a part of that. So if you don't want to be in covenant with him, he doesn't expect you to keep the sign of the covenant. It's that simple, guys. Sorry, it looks like you want to say something.
No, I'm just trying to breathe. My nose is all stuffed up. It's apparently
we're almost done, sweetie.
Apparently that's another pregnancy symptom nobody warned me about.
So he goes on to say, I've chosen from the seed of Jacob from amongst all that I've seen, and have written down as my firstborn son, and have sanctified him unto myself forever and ever. And I will teach them the Sabbath day, that they may keep Sabbath thereon from all work. So he already knows, he's already establishing from this very beginning that he knows some people aren't going to keep Sabbath.
Right.
He gets that because they don't want to be in covenant with him. They don't want to be considered part of his firstborn, his ruling class, the priesthood, Exodus 19:6. They don't want to be considered part of that. They don't want to go into covenant with him. He doesn't expect them to keep the sign of the covenant. He doesn't expect them to do Sabbath or circumcision. That's fine. They want to be bound for destruction. That's on them. God doesn't force people to love him. It's very simple, guys. Verse 21, and thus he created therein a sign in accordance with they should keep Sabbath with us on the seventh day, to eat and to drink, and to bless him who created all things. He has blessed and sanctified unto himself a peculiar people above all peoples, that they should keep Sabbath together with us. Again, twice. He says, keep the Sabbath with us in heaven. This is not just for Jews on the earth. This is not just even for Torah Messianic Christians on the earth. This is for everyone who wants to worship God. Heaven is already doing it. They're already observing the Sabbath with the Father and the Son.
Now, just to be clear, if you want to keep covenant with the Father, that does mean that you're grafting into a group of people referred to as Israel.
That's right. That's right.
So people who attack this book want to be like, oh, this is so anti-Gentile. This is really Israel-centric. This is saying the Sabbath is only for Israel. Well, yes, because if you're keeping the Sabbath, that's the sign of the covenant he made with Israel. And
right.
when you're in covenant with him, you become grafted into Israel. So any Gentile, quote unquote, can become an Israelite through grafting in, through keeping his commandments, through the covenant. So it's not, I mean, it's Israel centric in the sense that it's covenant centric. It's centered around people who come into covenant with him, who choose to leave their former lifestyle as heathens, as Gentiles, as pagans, whatever you want to call them, into following his lifestyle and his ways.
That's right. It's super simple. Taking back Eden Fe. Thank you again so much. Thank you again so much for the another super chat. I appreciate that. So, guys, we hope to encourage you with understanding just how beautiful the Father is, how much purpose He intended for you, everyone that's made. We all come from Adam. We don't come from some secondary race, third race. There's only one of mankind that from all men came. Everything that we are taught in modern culture about evolution and earth worship and conservation of everything on the earth and how we must protect this planet and all that nonsense, it's all a lie. It's all contradictory to the actual scriptures. We also hope you understand that God's law is eternal. He follows it in heaven as well. He connected it to the creation that you see every day. And then it's not a burden. It's all intended for your blessing. So be vigilant, be brave believers with us, and fight with a loving respect and a gentle answer. Fight those who are in confusion with exegesis of the word. The sower sows the word. Don't fight them physically. Don't fight them through disdain and mockery. Fight the deception that they're currently entrapped by through sowing the word in their life. This is how we bring people to the knowledge of God, to when they get a better sanctification process, as First Peter talks about, then they'll have a better understanding of the specific acts of sanctification so that they can be blessed by the Father even more. This is the goal of building each other up in love, not tearing each other down. In the same way, we want to extend that to all people, even if they're not believers or not, so that the world can see our good works and glorify our Father in heaven, because they too will come to repentance. So this is our goal. We're going to take questions now, so please put them in all capitalization if you want them to be seen. We're not going back to look at questions beforehand. We instruct you at the beginning of the video to wait till the questions at the end every week that we do this.
Every time we're on.
So you may have to repeat your question from earlier if you already stated it. Put them in all capitalizations so myself, my wife, and the moderators can easily see them as the chat scrolls quickly sometimes.
For questions to me about my nasal passages, yes, I've tried everything. I've got all the essential oils. I've got the Vapo rubs. I've got the Breathe Right strips. I've done everything. Both my chiropractor and my midwife have confirmed that severe congestion is typically part of a third trimester. It's just something I'm going through right now. At any given time, I've got one nostril closed up. And then at night, both of them close up. So I'm trying not to be a mouth breather in front of everybody right now, but I kind of have no choice. So I'm and plus I'm starting to lose more and more lung space as he grows. So it's just one of those things. I appreciate all the suggestions, but trust me, if it's something you're thinking to suggest to me to open my nasal passages, I've tried it. I'm even doing the nasal irrigation every night with the, it's not a neti pot, but it's similar with stuff added into it and everything. So I appreciate your suggestions, but I've probably already done it.
Ephesians 5:11 is asking, is it a transgression to work for the military industrial complex? I wouldn't say specifically. There's a lot of people that work in all types of jobs. That's, that's like asking, let me finish real quick. It's asking, is it a sin to work for a metal shop, knowing that metal's then turned into bullets later down the road? Like is it a sin to work in the medical industry, knowing that certain facets of the medical industry produce pharmakia? Like, again, that's upon your own conscience, but I would say as a general premise, no. I don't know exactly what you're doing now. If you're a hired CIA assassin, I would highly suggest you repent and get out of that line of work. But if you're just working as an engineer for somebody, we actually got a letter about this past week. I wasn't able to answer it yet. It's in my stack of unanswered letters I haven't been able to get to. There was an email, but they were asking about where I think working for Boeing or whatnot. But again, if you're just making plane parts, man, you're not the one pulling the trigger. So it's up on your own conscience. If you feel convicted that you don't need to be working because you think that this is a part of some dastardly organization whose only outcome is death or is somehow transgression of God's law. That's on your own conviction. But as a general concept, if we all stopped working for things that are abused in some way, none of us would have a job. Like, I couldn't use the internet. I couldn't use this computer because some of the component pieces may have been made by slave labor. There's all types of industries across the entire world that are interconnected with bad actors and unfortunate outcomes that we don't want. We have to be a light where we are. Daniel literally advised Nebuchadnezzar, Darius, Cyrus. He was an advisor to pagan Babylonian kings and Persian kings. Do you think that he walked up to them every day and said, you need to repent, turn to Yahweh? You're not doing the commandments of Yahweh. You'd have been killed the first day. He had to be wise about, remember, we're in dispersion and exile amongst the nations.
In the world, just not of it.
So he had to be very wise in his place. Now, what happened with his wisdom in his place? He lived out throughout like 4 different transfers of kingdoms and never got killed. Usually they slaughter all the advisors of the previous king. You're a part of the old administration. They usually took them out with the old administrative king.
Yeah.
But Daniel lived through all of them with the favor of the Lord. This is what's promised in the scriptures, in the covenant, Leviticus 26 and 1 Kings 8. But if you do the commandments of God, even in captivity of your enemies, you will be a light to them and you'll have favor amongst them. And you may even bring a lot of them to Christ. So I would say I understand the moral conflict about maybe what the company you work for has ties with, but or if you're a part of the government working for like the military, like, the Army, Navy, whatnot. But at the same time, keep in mind that, you can be a light from within where you are. And we're not in a perfect, ideal biblical situation, and we will not be until Christ returns. We are in the prophesied dispersion of everyone under the heaven who's scattered, as Genesis or Deuteronomy 30 verses 1 through 4 talks about. This is a moment of prophecy that was long foretold that we're living out right now. And as a result, we're considered in captivity of our enemies by biblical definition. As believers who want to be in covenant with Yahweh, as we read, we are not able to fully walk out his law in all the circumstantial ways. So I'd encourage you to pray on it and do upon your conviction. Ask the Father to bring you into clarity as far as if there's a position in that company that's going to allow you to follow him faithfully, or if he can bring a new position, new offer. You never know. He could bring you a better job. You may currently be working for them, or you may be, like the letter I read, you may be offered a position and wondering if you should take it. The Father can bring you a better offer. I promise you.
I would just say that term military industrial complex is a very wide reaching term that can apply to a lot of different sectors of society. So I would just have to ask, which actual sector of that complex would you be talking about? Because like Sean said, you can be part of the military industrial complex because it's an all-encompassing thing right now, but not actually be involved in, killing people overseas, like he was talking about, not actually working for the CIA and dark programs and things like that. So yeah, we would have to know specifically what kind of job you're talking about.
Dan's asking, how are Abraham and Isaac using the word sister when referring to their wives? Well, for Abraham's sake, I can't remember, did Isaac speak of Rebecca like that? But for Abraham's sake with Sarah, supposedly she was his half-sister from the family he came from Chaldea. That's part of I believe the Jewish tradition anyway, but I don't know if I don't remember a specific verse that fleshes that out. But at the same time, I know that he referred to her as his sister, trying to keep his head on his neck, to Abimelech, or the king of Egypt, I should say, the king of Egypt. And so he could have been a sister in that regard. But in the same way, my wife, though we're not blood related, is the sister in faith.
True.
Right? She's a sister in faith. And so Abraham, we're in the faith of Abraham. He understood these concepts of we're all brothers and sisters in God, in faith in God.
Amen, my brother in faith. That's
right.
So weird to say to my husband, but it's true.
Keeping company and being friends with fornicators. Indo's asking, hey, Brian, how you doing? He's asking, keeping company and being friends with fornicators. Paul's writing, should we not sit and eat with them? Which verse you're going off of? Please give me a specific verse so we can look at context. No disrespect, but I don't like rephrased concepts from Paul because he's easy to take out of context.
Yeah, because Paul has a very clear passage where he's talking about fellowshipping in faith with unbelievers and not being unequally yoked in that sense.
Yeah.
But in terms of interacting with people in the everyday world who are sinners, first of all, no one here is perfect.
Right.
Second, Yeshua sat with sinners and tax collectors. So I'm sure there were probably some fornicators along, in that group of, quote, sinners that he sat and ate with. So how are we supposed to be a light to any of these people if we are deliberately separating ourselves from them in terms of, I'm not going to sit with any of you people in the break room at lunch, or I'm not going to come to the company softball game because you're all fornicators, or at your home. I mean, a lot of us are in large families. Not everyone in our family is saved. If we go to a dinner at, our family member's house and say, oh, I'm going to sit over here in the living room because I can't sit with any of you fornicators. I mean, I don't see that example being set for us in scripture. I see us being in the world, just not of it. So we can have a different lifestyle and different values.
Yeah, I would want to define, again, respectfully, Brian, I would want to define these are very vague descriptor you've asked. So I don't want to define, what does it mean? What do you think it means by keeping company? Again, you're not, if someone's not being in the faith, then you cannot expect them to abide by the discipleship standards of the faith. But if they are in your company as a friend and they're in fornication, well, then I think it's right to talk to them because you love them and want to build them up and encourage them not to sin and to walk in repentance. But that's, but I'm not saying again, if we just excluded ourselves from every person in the world who doesn't abide by God's law, or by the standards of walking in truth and righteousness, you would never get to shine your light to them. You would never get to be around them to teach them the truth. Remember, Paul went into Athens and Greece under the temple of Diana and Artemis and Zeus on the hill, on Mars Hill, and he's preaching repentance to Christ. That means there's prostitutes walking around. That means all the senators are walking around. That means all the poets who went and got with the prostitutes are walking around. The reason I'm saying that, because I'm all describing fornication. I'm all describing the lifestyle of fornication. Did he go keep company with them like he made besties with them? Of course not.
Right.
But he went to be amongst them so he could preach the truth to them for a certain time. We see Christ doing this as well. So hopefully, without knowing what specific verse you're going off of, hopefully it's a decent, well-rounded answer. So let's all right, Sharon Wakefield is asking, how do you understand Hebrews 9:22? So let's take a look at it real quick.
That's good.
It's always this particular passage. I'm going to have to do a full-on study on Hebrews. Okay. Is it showing? I think it is. Okay. That's not good. Stood up here. All right. So in Hebrews, just like many of Paul's letters, we suspect Paul wrote it, but you never know. It could have been Barnabas. But in Hebrews, you can't just take one verse. I mean, you've got to read an entirety passage. But the verse you're asking about is, almost all things are by the law purged with blood, and without shedding of blood is no remission. So this, kind of a topic we've talked about with great depth about the sacrificial process, about the idea that there was a sprinkling of blood. There's this idea of the pouring out of the blood and the covering it with dirt. Part of sacrificing the animal properly in a temple of God by a ordained and qualified priest with the right heart. So this whole passage here, this is the previous context of Hebrews 9 goes all the way back to Hebrews 7 in an immediate context. The greater context is the entire book because it's explaining the priesthood of Christ. It's explaining what he received upon his resurrection and what he's doing in the heavenly tabernacle, which goes back to juxtaposing his priestly order, which is greater in authority and different than the Levites. And then on chapter 8 of Hebrews, it talks about how he's actually ministering in the heavenly tabernacle. And then it goes on to say how he's different from the frail and weak Levite men of mortal men who were not glorified, who were still mortal men, and how they had their own sins and had to atone for their own sins first. And so this is why the tabernacle itself on the ground, patterned after the one in heaven, as Hebrews 8:5 says, it's speaking about both the priests and the tabernacle in greater depth in chapter 9. Okay? So that just gives you a little backstory leading up to the ideas of what we're talking about in chapter 9. But let's start here in verse 15. And for this cause, he is the mediator of the New Testament, that's Christ, by the means of death for the redemption of the transgressions that were under the first testament, they which are called might receive the promise of an eternal inheritance. That's the future resurrection and being taken into the New Jerusalem. For where a testament is, there also of necessity must be the death of the testator. We have not died yet, so therefore we do not receive the inheritance due yet. For a testament is of force after men are dead. Otherwise, it's of no strength at all while the testator lives. Whereupon neither the first testament was dedicated without blood. For when Moses had spoken every precept to all the people according to the law, he took the blood of calves and of goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop and sprinkled both the book and all the people. In verse 20, this is the blood of the testament which God has enjoined unto you. Moreover, he sprinkled with blood both the tabernacle and all the vessels of the ministry. And almost all things are by the law purged with blood. And without shedding of blood, there's no remission. So this is calling back to Exodus 24, as well as the principle of cleansing both the ministering vessels within the tabernacle, as verse 21 is talking about. So it's assuming, for one, that you know the Old Testament. It's assuming you've read Exodus and Leviticus and understand it thoroughly, so that you know why he's quickly jumping from Exodus 24 mention to Leviticus, chapters 1 through 7 mentions. Verse 22 talks about that same concept about cleansing the furniture, the utensils and the things in the tabernacle, as well as the concept of the people, because he took it with scarlet, water, and wool, not just blood, but there was other things mixed with it. Is almost like a strange cleansing agent that they were making. We've talked about this in other times, because this is also Numbers 19 with the the ashes of the heifer that's burned. They make like a soap almost. Mm-hmm. So it's like a cleansing agent. So it's very interesting. Verse 23, it was necessary, therefore, that the pattern of the things in the heavens be purified with these. So this is calling back to the tabernacle on the ground that was patterned after the one in heaven. They had to be purified with the concept that it just spoke to you about the blood. But the heavenly things purified with better sacrifices than these. So this is a plural concept. So this is the idea that without the remission of the shedding of blood, there is no cleansing, as it talks about in verse 22. For Christ is not entered in the holy place made with hands, which are figures of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. So it's adding on to what it's been telling you for 8 previous chapters, that he's a priest, that he walks into the heavenly tabernacle as a priest and ministers in there according to the duties of a priest. Hebrews 8, 1 through 2. It's calling back to that again, just as it says in Hebrews 7, Hebrews 8, Hebrews 6, Hebrews 5, Hebrews 3. He's a priest forever. Okay? And he's ministering in a real temple. He's a priest forever. So this is why it's explained to him how he goes into this temple, because of his once and for all sacrifice on the cross that got him to his priesthood. That's what it actually is mentioning back up here in, I think, verse 15, by means of death. Okay? So this is why the death on the cross was not the single moment of redemption that got him to his resurrection. And then what it's been telling you for 8 full chapters in Hebrews, that he's made a high priest in the tabernacle in heaven to do this job that is being compared back to the one explained in Exodus and Leviticus. So in the same way the law prescribes that the vessels within the temple must be purified in a certain way, also Christ does the same thing, as verse 23 says, but with better sacrifices than the ones on the ground, because he's got a better heart. They're more acceptable to God, and in my opinion, the animals are probably purer. So it's very simple. We just have to know the callback references to the front of the Bible in Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers about the process for priests, how they cleanse the temple, and everything involved. So it's a great question. Hopefully we gave you a thorough answer.
Susan Squire, Sean and I are both second-born. We're not firstborn.
Yeah, if you're just talking about the sequential order of who's born first, I don't know, but if you're talking about the use of the word firstborn, it was a term for rulership. So it wasn't just about like who's literally born first. It was an idiomatic reference for a ruler within the family of the descendancy that would have that rulership passed on from the patriarch, from the father. Berto, if you're helping your mother, I mean, you're literally doing one of the 10 commandments. She's not paying you for work, you're volunteering your work to help your mother, to honor her, bro. That's not breaking the Sabbath, not at all. Yeah, you're good, bro. Honor your mother and father as much as you can.
By the way, I've done mouth taping, but when both my nostrils
Baby.
are, I'm trying.
Ignore those.
I'm just trying to let people know, like when I say I've tried everything you guys are going to suggest, I literally have mouth tape in my room, but when both my nostrils are stuffed up, I can't breathe through my nose with my mouth taped up.
Guys, let's just refrain from all.
It's a pregnancy syndrome. It's not something.
Let's just refrain. Let's just focus on the scriptures and refrain from all medical.
It's okay.
Advice
I'm
for the
conversing
wife right
with
now.
people. You're looking for the next question. I'm just
Okay.
letting people know.
Let's just not get distracted.
I'm not. It's not distracted. I brought it up, so I'm just responding.
Tracy, no, I do not have a specific video on the difference between Sabbath and Judaism's observance of Sabbath. We've just talked emphatically about how they add a lot of extra rules and traditions onto their observance of the Sabbath. So we do have a video on the Sabbath. If you want to type in Kingdom in Context, how to keep the Sabbath, I think that's what it's titled.
Yeah. And
we go over the scriptures on how you would do that. And I would suggest learning that first before trying to mix it with what Judaism teaches, honestly.
A good video for Indo would be what's it titled? How do we treat friends and family who don't keep Torah?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good one.
That we address all that kind of stuff, all those questions of how do we interact with people in this world who aren't in covenant like we are. We have a video about that, Indo, so you should check that
out. Oops, how you doing? Thank you for your question. She's asking, it's Exodus 16:29, saying we are not to leave our houses on Sabbath day. No, Exodus 16 is a specific application for them picking up the bread and the manna while they were in the wilderness. They were to pick up the bread and the manna, the manna, I should say.
Yeah.
They'll pick up the manna and get enough of it 6 days, because it wasn't going to fall on the 7th. And then they had to cook it on the 6th day because it would have melted if they didn't. So there was like these specific instructions for what they were dealing with and how to keep the Sabbath with a specific food requirement, because they didn't have any food in the wilderness. So the Father was already doing a miracle for them so they could have sustenance. But with that miracle, he was giving them bread from heaven, and it melted in the sunlight.
Actually, it says that if it was left overnight, it would breed worms.
It would, well, if they didn't eat it. But if they didn't pick it up too soon, it would melt.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, because it pops up like dew.
If after they cooked it and they didn't eat it soon, it would breed worms and they couldn't eat it. But if this is why they couldn't make more than 1 day's extra, remember? But if they didn't retrieve it from the ground, it would melt in the sunlight and the heat of the day. So the point is, there was special instructions in all of Exodus 16. I would never suggest we get our Sabbath instructions from Exodus 16. That is a specific concept of how they were keeping Sabbath, or trying to learn to keep Sabbath, while also this specific instruction for the manna that was falling and how to make sure they had food for the Sabbath day, since the manna wasn't going to fall on the Sabbath day. So it's just, there's plenty of other, check out How to Keep the Sabbath, Kingdom in Context, plenty of other scriptures that teach a greater in depth on just not working and not making other people work for you. Is very, very simple how to keep the Sabbath. But we go over it with lots of scriptures. And there's even a passage in that we see in, people leave their house all the time to go to the synagogues to learn and hear the scriptures being read all throughout the Gospels. Christ did it. It was his custom to do that on the Sabbath. Paul's doing it all over the book of Acts, ministering to people in synagogues throughout the Mediterranean. So yes, you can leave your house on the Sabbath. Just don't go to your job, and don't go make people work for you, and don't go leave your house in order to gain some sort of profit for your life. Like that's, considered working. So yeah, you're not trapped in your house on the Sabbath. This is not Judaism. All right. Vader Bear is asking, if the evening and the morning are dictated by the sun and moon, what was there before day 4 when they were created? What separated the evening and the morning for those 3 days from your research? Just the Father's instruction, explaining that there was a definitive time, because he's clearly choosing to do all this within 6 days. So that there's a definitive time of the idea that there is a passing of time from one day to the next that's being delineated in the story of the creation. So even though the sun and moon are given to regulate and for the days and the passing of time, the Father still knows how much time's passing. So he can explain the idea of the evening and the morning from passing one day to the next. So I know a lot of people like to teach that they think the sun was already made, but it just wasn't illuminated until day 4. I don't think it changes anything but still it's not shining. So it's not governing the day and the night until day 4, regardless of what theory you'd like to go with. But so yeah, hopefully it's a decent answer for you. There's nothing specifically that says how he accounted the times other than just he said this was day 1 and it was an evening and morning, and then this is consistent with how he keeps time for the rest of all of eternity, if I could put it like that, because the sun and moon are never going away. The heavens are never going away. And I know people are immediately thinking Second Peter 3:10 right now, and they're thinking about Revelation 20, but that's a whole other conversation. We have to read it in context, look at the definitions of the words. A lot of people have asked me this over time. Every time we mention the firmament, all the typical questions come up: boats over the horizon, weather patterns, seasons, all these things that are easily answered. But these are the natural questions that come out, right? And this is another one that talks about falling meteorites, or not comets, because what they tell us comets are never actually hit the Earth.
Right.
So, but as far as meteorites, they say a space rocks falling down in our atmosphere and ignited by the atmosphere and then fall. I think there's they're not coming from space. They're not coming from a heliocentric model. In my research, volcanoes that are constantly going off across the face of the Earth spew sulfur-based rock into the air, which is highly flammable rock. And then that is what eventually gets into the weather patterns and falls somewhere else. And as it's falling down, the air friction with the oxygen will ignite it. And this is why we see it ignite and then burn out real quick at high rates of speed. So that is happening all the time throughout the day. Volcanoes are going off all the time, spewing this specific type of sulfuric rock, highly flammable sulfuric rock, into the air, which is naturally going to fall down at a high rate of speed. This is why whenever they do find meteorites, they find high amounts within the meteorites, within the what has fallen to the Earth, they find high amounts of this sulfur rock within it. And so this is what comes out of volcanoes specifically. And it's also found in the outflow of volcanic activity around the volcanoes themselves. So I think it's actually a very simple, natural answer of what we do see in the creation, that there are the air streams of different patterns of wind in the higher atmosphere. These things are shot up into the higher atmosphere, and then eventually when they fall back down, they ignite with the air friction, and it's very simple. They're not coming from outer space. They're not coming from the Oort belt. Not coming from some destroyed piece of the moon from 4 billion years ago. It's just very simple. It's part of the Father's creation. Princess of Elohim, no, I don't think you can drink from the firmaments. It's a solid structure holding water above it. It's supporting waters above it. Oh, cool Ephesians 5:11. Hopefully it's a blessing to you, brother.
I wasn't even noticing Sheol-based questions.
Yeah.
Yes, we can eat tallow, liver, and kidney. Those laws refer specifically to the offerings given by the priests in the tabernacle.
That's right. Which is why you quoted the specific verses you did about the offerings by the priests.
Yeah, that's specifically in the context of the priests. If you haven't slaughtered the animal and are offering a portion of it on an altar to the Father, it's okay to eat. In fact, tallow and liver and kidney are actually, liver especially is like nature's multivitamin. It's amazing health benefits for your body. So,
Nomad 1025, Jesus tells us when we pray to the Father. Now, Jesus may receive our prayers because he's the high priest, and that was the job of the high priest.
Mm.
But and you can call out to Jesus all you want, brother. I mean, he stands in the authority of the Father. I don't think there's a problem with that. But as far as what Jesus taught us, he's teaching us that when we pray, we say, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done." And so, I would encourage as a first priority, go ahead and pray to the Father, knowing that Jesus is hearing that prayer to bring it to the Father on your behalf. It's a part of his priestly duty in the ministry and temple in heaven. But you address the Father. This is what Paul talks about in Romans 8. We've been given a spirit of adoption wherewith we cry, Abba, cry Father. It's that word in Hebrew, Abba. Ken Gibbs is asking, is there an order you'd suggest that's best to read the books of the Bible when including the extra biblical books? Honestly, no, sister, I don't.
Well, I'd say for the first part of it, you could start with Enoch, then go to either Genesis or Jubilees. And then after you read Genesis, you could put in the testaments of the 12 patriarchs, just if you want more context to the storyline of the history of mankind.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, those collections, Enoch, Genesis, Jubilees, Testament of 12 Patriarchs, will get you all to the point of
the Exodus,
the chronological timeline leading up to Exodus chapter 1.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to start, if you're asking for, I don't still know your familiarity with reading the Bible. I don't know if you've read a little bit of it, none of it, some of it, all of it, and we're trying to go back through it with extra biblical books included. I don't know what your main focus is, if you're worried about the creation, or if you want to look at more apocryphal books that talk about kingdom come, prophecies of that. There's a whole bunch of different ones on that. But ultimately, you could definitely start there. But check out our Honor of Kings series, because we go over different not included books that we talk about. And we're going to be starting season 4 again at the end of this year. So check that out. It's in our playlists. We have 3 full seasons of Honor of Kings. Hopefully it'll help you. This is a question that a lot of men and women do struggle with who've joined the military, and they start to come to the knowledge of the truth of the commandments, and they are not in control of their life, guys. You have signed a covenant with the military. I know you don't want to call it that, but when you signed your contract, you know, if you're in the military, you gave them your body, you gave them yourself. That's why they inject anything they want into you. That's why they can send you anywhere across the world and put your life in danger. That's why you hurry up and wait all the time. You know that you signed your life over to the military. And you may have done that when you're young and didn't know any better. But this is a situation where if you can request to have your day off on the Sabbath for your religious observance, I'm pretty sure the military accommodates for religious observances. So I don't know how, to the extent they accommodate for that. And again, I don't know all the law for military procedure, but I'm pretty sure, regardless of your religious observance, they can commission you to go on overseas or anywhere to be engaged in battle, regardless of your religious observances. So again, you signed a contract and gave your life to someone else who is not observing God's laws. So I would try to speak about this with sensitivity, because many people have done that before they understood all this stuff. And you may want to go career, right? I get that. I would highly ask, speak with your CO, speak with whomever you need to in the chain of command, and ask if you can have a religious observance for your day, and if that can be a permanent fixture for you. If not, I would highly reconsider when your contract is up about how you want to proceed after that and where you want to go, whether you want to go career or not. And that's just on the Sabbath. That's just one topic about everything you signed up for the military, especially in this modern world. So that would be like, that's low in the totem pole as far as moral priorities when it comes to what are you doing in the military, as far as why are you there, what are you trying to accomplish, what's going on, are you serving the nation, or are you a part of what kind of program you're a part of? Like there's a lot of other questions to ask them. I'm trying to answer this as efficiently but as broadly as possible for you to understand that I love the heart of someone that wants to keep Sabbath, knowing they're in a situation where they're not in control of their life. I don't think Daniel was able to keep the Sabbath faithfully, maybe like he wanted to.
Yeah.
It doesn't tell us while he was under the control of the king of Babylon if they gave him a religious accommodation. We literally saw him and being persecuted for his religious beliefs many times. Same with the three Hebrews, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. So, I understand it's a struggle, brother. We're in exile if we're believers, in captivity of enemies, and it's a little even more stringent when you sign up for the army of the enemies. So it's look, I love this country, and I think I love the people of this country. I'm not saying anything bad about the military. As far as the hearts of the people of the military, 99% of them, there's a lot of questionable decisions being made by the higher up brass. And I think that, especially, with the coercion of the politicians and the international interests, and I think it's, I personally, at this point in history, I personally wouldn't be joining the military personally, but there's a lot involved in that conversation. I'm trying to be as respectful and loving as possible. We do not denigrate the service of any of the people that have served.
No,
I have
we respect it.
lots of family members,
Yeah.
father, uncle, grandfather that were in the military. Grandfather was in World War II. I get it, man. I just know that you're in a really difficult situation trying to be a commandment keeping Christian in the modern day military. So you may want to really pray about your contract in the future going forward. Do what you got to do to be faithful now, because you did sign that contract, and the Father honors contracts to a degree. Now, I'm not saying that you should do anything against as far as creating chaos or hurt or immoral acts to people that are unjust. But at the same time, if you try to get a dishonorable discharge, that's up to you. But I think there's probably some recourse of religious accommodation you'd want to investigate first. So keep that in mind. Hopefully it's a decent answer for you. We're just going to take a couple more here. We're coming up on 2 hours. My wife can't breathe. So she's been holding her breath for 2 hours now, guys. I'm going to see if we can get this. There may be times in the future coming up that she may not join me for these because she won't be physically up for it. So
yeah, I may not be able to get out of the dang bed. We'll see. Hoping to stay active and spry up until I'm giving birth, but some days I just need to rest.
All right, this will just be the last question.
Okay.
CS, is that an S? CS21 is asking, may one attend one's child's sports competition on Sabbath? We get this question often.
Yeah.
And if you got to pay, it's rough. I would say no. Because most of the time you got to pay. The refs are being paid, the building's being paid for, the judges might be paid for. It just depends. It depends on the situation, on what kind of sports it is. But if there's an exchange of money going on that you have to pay to get into the gates, you got to pay to work, because the gate ticket's paying for the concession stand, it's paying for the rental of the lot, the lights, or whatever. I mean, you're literally paying for people to work for you, or you're paying other people to work for their own profit. And it's a tough one, but I would say no. I would say, is there any way, you're probably not the only person that would want to have it on a different day. So you might want to talk to some of the other parents and see if it's possible. I know when it comes to like educational sports with government funded schools, it's nearly impossible because they have like set their schedules with other towns and other schools way ahead of time. But if it's like the local soccer club, if it's, I don't know, it's a tough one. The general thing would be you don't want to pay other people money on the Sabbath to have them work in any regard for you. So what would you say, sweetie?
I would mostly agree. Like if it's something that involves an exchange of money that day, yeah, I wouldn't attend. If it's something where everybody's paid into the pot at the beginning of the year and everything's covered and you're just going to the local soccer field and there's nothing to pay to get in and you're not paying for concessions. I mean, not every
Right. It
team
depends on what it
sport,
is.
not every child sport involves all that stuff that goes along with it. You know, it might just be at the local baseball field and there's nothing going on except the coach is showing up to, you know, coach the little league kids.
Right.
You know, that kind of stuff I don't see an issue with. I see it's in a gray area, so it really depends on your personal conviction about it. So yeah, I think really it just depends on if you need to be exchanging money that day for those things to be going on. So like I just sent him a video last night of these two adorable little kids having this little Taekwondo match. It was super cute. They couldn't have been more than like 3 or 4 years old.
Yeah, they were the 5-year-olds.
And he was saying, yeah, because we want to have Levi in Taekwondo because
I took it almost on my life.
Yeah. Now Sean will obviously be teaching him here at home anyways, but we would love for him to get interaction with other kids because he's going to be homeschooled. So we want to find other ways that he can do activities with other children. But he was saying that most of those tournaments are always on Saturdays. So yeah, so we're going to have to navigate that ourselves when that time comes. You know, are we going to have him in tournaments? Are we just going to have him going just to learn all the techniques and just be around other kids? Are we going to tell him, well, we don't do the tournaments because this and that? Can we have him in the tournaments that aren't on Sabbaths and, you know, not include him in the Sabbaths and still be part of, you know, however that works? So this is definitely something that really is going to depend on individual personal conviction if things aren't directly involving an exchange of money in business for those days. So yeah, just take it to the Father in prayer, I would say.
Guys, thank you so much for being here on this Sabbath Fellowship. We hope it was a blessing to you. The scriptures we reviewed, hopefully we did a decent job with answering some of the questions. We pray for wisdom every week when we do this, that the Father would help us answer these questions. This is not something that a lot of ministries want to do because it's challenging to just answer a whole bunch of random questions. We try to be thorough with it, and
Absolutely, Ken.
all right. So
he needs to teach me too.
Ken's actually in the Sabbath chat today, so we'll have to do his question last. Sean, will you teach me Taekwondo if we ever open a commune together? A commune together. Well, for one,
or a FEMA camp.
Yeah, I was about to say
likely.
I'm never going to a commune, but if we ever ended up in an enclosed space together where we couldn't leave, I would do my best when the guards aren't looking to teach you some neck snapping techniques. And yeah, it'd be great, brother. It'd be great. So yeah, guys, thanks for being here. You guys are awesome, and we just, you know, we pray for everyone that listens to us, that whatever scriptures we offer and whatever seeds that we plant, that the Father, His Spirit may water them in your lives, so that you can be, you know, better encouraged in your relationships, better edified in how you walk out your discipleship with Christ, so you can be more effective and productive in your knowledge of Christ. That is our hope and our goal, and not that we become, you know, judging of others, right, but that we become more loving of others. And that's the goal of discipling and being more like Christ, is that you don't become more angry and vindictive. You don't become, you know, someone that sits in the judgment seat, but instead you become more of a servant to someone else. That's what he talked about in John 17, that those who be first in the kingdom will be a servant to all, right? I don't think it's in John 17, but I'm just thinking of Jesus washing their feet in John 17, talking about, you know, the greatest among you must be a servant, right? And this is our goal. This is our heart. This is what we hope to exemplify. And we hope that you understand that you do have purpose. You were created on purpose by a Father full of purpose, and that he created you in a wonderful place. Everything's catered and designed for you, from the atmosphere to the lights, to the sound waves, to the water you drink, everything. Did you guys realize that the natural water that we drink was literally, it's the same water as heaven above? It's an amazing thing. We're going to do shows on water in the future, but because there's so much to talk about with that. Yeah. But anyway, we hope it's a blessing to you, and we're going to go get some rest. Get some breath as well.
Yeah, I need to try and clear this out. I know I probably won't be able to, but I appreciate you guys. Again, thanks to everyone who's sent gifts through the registry. I've mentioned it before, but I really don't have much family in the area, and I definitely don't have many friends. Like the last group of friends I had were people I worked with down in Colorado. So a baby shower is not a thing that has ever even crossed my mind, really. So it's kind of like getting to have like a virtual baby shower with all you guys. And that's because basically you guys are my friends and family. So it's very meaningful to me. And we just appreciate all the love and support and prayers. And I know he doesn't like when I, respond to some things in the chat, but I enjoy being able to connect with you guys and share a little bit of my personal life going on right now, especially with the pregnancy, because I know a lot of you are emotionally invested. So this has been a journey for us. You've all been with us on the journey. And I enjoy, even if I'm just complaining about these things, I enjoy sharing it with you guys and seeing other women in the chat be like, yeah, I totally went through that, and just commiserating on the beautiful burden of pregnancy. And, just it helps to have the joyful reminder from you guys that this is all going to be worth it in the end. And I know I'm going to get to that point where my hormones are going to come to a place where I'm going to forget all of these symptoms that I'm complaining about all the time and probably be like, oh my gosh, I want to do that again. So right now I'm like, how do women do this more than once? I mean, there's no way I can go through this more than once, but talking to you guys about these things and seeing everybody reassure me that, oh yeah, you forget all about it once you're holding that baby and you smell that new baby smell. I enjoy these parts of our Sabbath where I get to get kind of personal with you guys. So, sorry, babe. Sorry. I'm not, totally, all business in terms of let's just focus on the scriptures. I enjoy getting to connect with you guys in the chat.
Yeah. This is why we're good together. Cause you balance me out.
Yeah. So I think
I get hyper focused on the scriptures and
he does.
you bring me back down to reality.
Yeah, that we're fellowshipping with folks here. So
Yeah.
since we don't have an oneg afterwards.
Yeah. Speaking of, guys, we are going to, as you guys know, I've been involved with a Lighthouse Project for like 3 years. So that is a off and on thing throughout my week, as far as like, my level of involvement and how I'm consulting and helping. As well as we have Kingdom of Context that we do. I'm working on the study guide weekly, and we also have the Brave Believer, and then we now have the Days of Noah channel that is also what we're working on weekly. And so I just want to let you guys know that we're going to have to discontinue the Brave Believer channel, and I'm going to take that content and try to figure out a good way to adopt it over to Kingdom of Context. I won't be able to do as much of that type of reactionary content, but I do plan to still react to the rest of the Chosen series and some other things, and integrate that style of reactionary content and commentary into some of the videos we upload to Kingdom of Context, so that we're not really getting away, totally doing away with the Brave Believer. I just can't do 3 channels, guys. I'm too busy, especially with the baby on the way and all that stuff. I just can't do 3 channels. So we're just going to have Kingdom of Context, Days of Noah. But again, that's kind of like its own entity. And go subscribe to that if you haven't already. It's already like 7,000 subs at this point. And so, but I won't have the time to do the Brave Believer and all the extra, everything involved in that, because there's a whole separate effort. So I'm going to integrate that type of content into Kingdom of Context. I think it was the month before or last month, I already turned off, everyone that's a patron to the Brave Believer already turned off being charged from that. So you shouldn't have been charged either last month or this month. I can't remember which one it is. And appreciate you guys for all your support and all that. And we're going to just adopt that same content over to Kingdom of Context. Okay. So, and we do have some new shirts coming out in the future.
Oh,
yeah.
Do we?
Yeah. I've got a bunch of designs I haven't released yet. So,
to answer the question in the chat, I'm 30 weeks today. So ideally I have 10 weeks left. And Lois, there is a baby registry. If you just go to my Facebook page, I've got it pinned on the top of my page if you wanted to check out, because you were asking if we have a registry. Yes, we do. So 8 to 10 weeks is what I'm shooting for. I don't want to go too far over. My midwife can still deliver up to 42 weeks, which is good, but I'd rather keep it around 38 to 40 just to be safe. So for anyone who's praying specifics for us, that's one of the specifics that I ask the Father for every day, is that he would take me to no less than 38 weeks and no more than 40. So
yeah, in the future we'll have our new studio with
Yeah.
more room. Like I said, maybe we'll get like a table so we can sit at a table next to each other, and Levi can be there with us, and
yeah,
we'll have plenty of room. It's gonna be exciting.
yeah, we'll see how he does. We'll see if he's
Well, little
camera
Levi
ready.
will be with us at the Sabbath Fellowship. It'll be great.
That's the plan, at least. If he can behave.
Yeah.
We'll see.
We'll see.
I'm sure everyone's laughing at us right now when we say that.
Yeah, we'll have to schedule nap times for him right now.
Yeah, we've got this other baby throwing a tantrum now
we gotta
already because we're 20 minutes past her park time.
Beneath the Mighty One, thank you for your super chat. If you wanna deal with the dogs, I'll answer these real quick.
They're fine. They're
Okay,
all right.
so Beneath the Mighty One, thank you for your super chat. I just saw it for some reason. I don't know why I didn't see it as we went. It says, "What's your response to our beloved brother?" Yeah, we're not. I don't want to.
praying for him.
Yeah, we're just praying for clarity. We don't really want to talk about other ministries or content creators. But I've had conversations with everyone behind the scenes. Everyone knows where we stand on disagreement, and just praying for clarity. People continue to search the scriptures. I'm happy that everyone involved is still seeking Christ, and I think that's what matters the most.
And you can reject the teachings of the Father and replace them with the teachings of the church fathers, but we wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, people do that all the time, but we don't recommend it. Ken Gibbs, thank you for the super sticker. I appreciate that also. Thank you so much. And
yeah,
I think
those didn't pop up. That's
they
so
didn't.
weird.
Yeah, that is
So
strange for us. Thank you so much, guys. We'll see you next time.
Love
Have
you
a good Sabbath.
guys. Have a good week.